You're listening to CIUT 89.5 FM. This is Donna G, and you're tuned to a special edition of The More the Merrier. This one focused on the upcoming Toronto International Film Festival, which runs from September the 8th to the 18th. And as single tickets go on sale September 4th, I thought I would do a focus so that you can get to hear from TIFF programmers about some of the films that will be playing this year. So joining me during the hour will be Jane Schoettle, an international programmer with TIFF, and later on in the show I'll be joined by Jason Anderson to talk about the Short Cuts International Short Film Program. There is 11 sections of that, so keep it locked to CIUT 89.5 FM. You're listening to CIUT 89.5 FM. This is Donna G back with, starting coverage of TIFF 16 this year. And joining me by telephone is international programmer Jane Schoettle. And part of the areas that Jane programs is Australia and New Zealand. And since people may not think about those areas when they think in terms of film, I'm going to focus on that for you today. So get ready with your pen and pencil or your phone to take notes about the potential films you might be seeing at TIFF 16. Jane, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Donna. It's great to talk to you again.
My pleasure. Always enjoy looking through the program book and seeing your name.
Thanks. Me too. It means this job done.
Now, actually, the first film that I want to talk about, Goldstone, is part of the Platform series, isn't it? The Platform section. Tell us about that section.
Platform is a section that we started about, I think this is its second year. And the idea behind it was that we really wanted to showcase auteur-driven international cinema, sort of to put a spotlight on some really special films and filmmakers that we thought perhaps North America wasn't paying enough attention to. And certainly with Goldstone by Ivan Sen, it's perfectly fit into that section for sure. People may remember, I think 2 or 3 years ago, maybe 3, we showed a film of Ivan's called Mystery Road, which was massively successful. And this film, Goldstone, is essentially a sequel, if you will, or a follow-up with the same central character. And it's a beautiful, fantastic film.
Yeah, and it's, the mystery, the thriller aspect is really intriguing because I saw Mystery Road and enjoyed just being part of the culture and the grittiness of the police job, the police work, was very interesting. So Goldstone, when I saw that, I thought that has to be on my list.
Well, yes, and it stars the always wonderful Aaron Peterson, who played the same character in Mystery Road. And Aaron has this remarkable, charismatic on-screen presence. And again, it takes place in the outback in around a controversial mining community. So there's a lot going on, and there's many, many different story threads that are all included in this, and it makes for very, very compelling viewing. And Ivan Sen is, I don't know what number film this is of his, but he's a very accomplished Australian filmmaker. And I should add, too, probably if anyone is interested, that Aaron Peterson is Aboriginal, Ivan Sen is Aboriginal, and the whole tone that they bring to these series of films really has an infusion of amazing Aboriginal culture in it.
And you have David Gulpilil. I can never pronounce his last name.
Yes, no, that's correct. Gulpilil, yeah.
And he did an amazing job in Charlie's Country a couple of years ago. So it was great to see him back again in this film. So
he's very moving in the film.
Yeah. And, just a shout out to those, if you haven't seen Charlie's Country, check out Netflix because this is one film that you definitely don't want to miss. Not part of TIFF, but was. Okay.
Yeah, true.
So that leads me to the Discovery section with Boys in the Trees, Nicholas Verso.
Yeah, this is a real little gem of a film that it would be great if people didn't miss it. It actually has been, right after I invited it, it got invited to Venice. So it's going to be in Venice before us, and then it's coming to Toronto. It's a beautiful, mystical, artistic, lovely coming-of-age story, but with many more layers of other genres on top of it. It's really hard to categorize, but it's essentially about what happens when two childhood friends, and at this stage they're only, I think, around 16 years old, but they were very good friends when they were kids, and then something happened that split them up, and they reunite again on Halloween night. And it's what happens throughout the night as they re-examine their friendship. It's visually stunning. And I think one of the things that's really great about this is that I don't think we often see depictions of boyhood friendship on screen in a really meaningful way. And this film absolutely has that. And there's all kinds of fantastical and magical realism elements to it, and there's a big twist at the end which I cannot even begin to allude to, so it's really worth a look.
Well, you called it dazzling, spooky, and emotionally rich, so that's what grabbed me.
Well, I would say I don't disagree with what I wrote.
Okay, so we have a couple of sort of intriguing films based on true life stories. Joe Sank's Consolation.
Joe Cinque.
Joe Cinque. Sorry,
yes,
Sank.
I've been corrected by the filmmaker.
Cinque's,
Joe
okay.
Cinque's Consolation.
Okay.
Yeah.
Tell me more about this work, Jane.
Well, this is really interesting. This is based on a true story, and this was quite a few years ago a very famous crime in Australia, where a young woman was put on trial for the murder of her boyfriend, and it was one of those things where she clearly was emotionally unbalanced, and she told many people in their social circle that she was going to kill herself and kill her boyfriend. The problem is nobody paid any attention. They thought she couldn't possibly be serious. Ultimately, she did not take her own life, but she took his. Subsequent to that, there was an Australian novelist who wrote a very famous book about it, a best-selling famous book about it. And this film is based on the book. And it's both a psychological and legal thriller. But most of the story, I would say 85% of the story, is the time leading up to the crime. And all of the things about their social circle and the people that they knew and the relationships that they had and the relationship between them, which was extremely unusual, shall we say. And so it's really for people who want to dig down into the psychology of things and to try to understand what exactly happened here. And there's a lot of unanswered questions, but that only makes the film even more compelling.
Yeah, especially since you have somebody who it's known that she said, she was going to kill herself and him. And then, I guess in this case, hindsight really is 20/20 for those people who heard those words from her.
Well, it's true, and the film doesn't dwell on it too much, but what they do get into is how, in a bizarre way, some of her friends were kind of benignly, well, not so benignly, complicit in this. She was an extremely, and continues to be today, an extremely charismatic person, and the kind of person that really engages with other people emotionally. The actress who plays her gives an extraordinary performance. She's gobsmackingly beautiful on screen, but which makes her, eye candy and very compelling. But much more so, she gives a really complex, rich, deep, nuanced performance, and it's really what drives the film forward.
Wow, sounds very powerful.
It is.
You've got some stars associated with this next film, The Lion.
Yes.
Nicole Kidman, Rooney Mara, and Dev Patel. Tell us about that, Jane.
Well, this is another one that's based on a true story, and people may recall from a couple of years ago, it really made the press, where a young man who was born in India but was adopted by an Australian family after he became separated from his birth family. Years later, he decided he wanted to try and track down his original birth family, and he was successful at it by using Google Earth, of all things. And I mean, that's a very simple explanation of what the story is. But this really is one of the most remarkable films of the year, not only because of the story that's behind it, but the way that the film has been made. It's a first-time director, Garth Davis, but he paints the film on a very vast canvas. The first quarter, maybe third of the film takes place in India. There's not very much dialogue, but the photography is remarkable, and the way that he captures the emotional aura of around this young boy who does become separated from his family. He's only 4 or 5 years old, and what happens to him. It is some of the most nail-biting sequences that I've experienced in the cinema in the last couple of years. Photography is amazing. Then we move forward many years to Tasmania, where the story takes place, and we meet Dev Patel as the young man, the boy grown up. But this is also Dev Patel as you have never seen him before. I have it on good authority from the producer that they had a trainer and a nutritionist work with him because they wanted him to look like the real-life character, who is a significantly larger person than Dev Patel might be originally. I'm telling you, if you want to see buff Patel, I mean no disrespect when I say that. He is very charismatic and compelling on screen. But beyond that too, it's also the story of a young man who knows that there's a little piece of him missing, and it's no reflection on his adoptive family. And they actually are extremely supportive of his search. But how would you do this? And so it was only when he and a couple of other friends really started looking at what technology might be able to help them with. It's a remarkable detective story. And the ending is, well, I don't even want to tell you. There's not going to be a dry eye in the house.
Well, what I find interesting about the film is the cultural mix, where you've got India and Australia as well, the two areas of the world in this one figure.
Well, it's interesting. You're exactly right that he knows he's from someplace else, but he's he's raised an Australian. And so he couldn't be more Australian in the way he speaks and his love for cricket and, all of those other things. But he knows there's something about his background that he has to close the loop on. And it becomes increasingly more demanding to him. And it's ironic, since the film has become announced, believe it or not, several people have emailed me and said that they have adopted children out of the same orphanage in India where he was adopted from, and how they are coming forward and they're going to go see the film.
Wow.
Yeah, I know. I mean, who knew?
I know.
So it's just, again, it speaks to the universality of film and how it has the potential to touch people, and how his very personal story has really moved people all over the world. And there's a lot to be said for these kinds of ripples.
And I vaguely recall seeing something on Facebook about this because of the Google Earth involvement and the social media and how things go viral that way. Very, very intriguing. Now, a different time period, New Zealand, 1960s, The Patriarch.
I know this film is one of the surprises of the year. It's by Lee Tamahori, who's made many big Hollywood films. He's made a James Bond film and a couple of thrillers, but he's actually probably best known to international film fans as the director of Once Were Warriors many, many years ago. It's important for me to stress, though, that this film, while still set within a Maori community, is nothing like that film at all. which is, of course, the filmmaker's right. But it's interesting that Lee has gone back. I mean, he's Maori from New Zealand, and he's gone back home to find his latest story. It's based on a novel by the same author who wrote the book that Whale Rider was based on. And I love this film for so many reasons. First of all, I love these big, sprawling family dramas, and that's what this is. It's an intergenerational story about a very big Maori family, very successful, own a lot of land, farm it, work extremely hard, run, though, by this very stern and unyielding, as is the title gives you, patriarch. And it's what happens when some of the youngest members of the family decide to push back on some of his values and issues. In the meantime, they also have some complex stories going on with some of the other people, the Pakea, the white people in the community in which they live, more to do with the competition around farming, and there's some backstory too, some old secrets that come to the fore. It's also visually, I mean, 1961 in New Zealand, it's fantastic. The cars are fantastic. The fashion is fantastic. And it's at a time in their history where there were still a lot of traditional elements within their lifestyle, but they also had, of course, all the latest things and the radios and the cars and everything, you know.
Yeah, well,
so,
this seems to be a different look at the Maori culture in film.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, and the performances are terrific, and there's some really, I just really love it. You really come out of it feeling satisfied that you've had a sense of a story that goes on for a long time, and it does give you a really great sense of those people in that time, in that place, where they were in their history. And I just really love it. And we've just confirmed that Lee's coming.
Oh, wonderful.
And I'm a big fan, and I'm a little bit sort of googly-eyed and starstruck. But
you're going to be fangirling?
I'm going to try not to. That's, part of my job is not to do that. But I've been a big fan of his work for a long time, and I did have occasion to meet him once briefly, and he's a lovely person. And so I'm really super looking forward to those Q&As.
Yeah. Last in that area of the world, the rehearsal, which focuses on young people again.
Yeah. Well, this is also interesting in that it's got a literary root. Eleanor Caton, that wrote The Luminaries, that prize-winning book, this is actually the novel that she wrote before she wrote The Luminaries. And it takes place in a drama school in Auckland, New Zealand, and it's sort of the merging of several stories, and it's about the very charismatic head of this drama school and the emotional pressure, if you will, that she puts on many of the students. But beyond that, it's also about one of their students, a particularly, I would say, naive and possibly ingenuous young man who very much wants to be an actor, but he doesn't come from the big city. He comes from a smaller community. And without quite understanding what he's getting drawn into, he begins a relationship with a young girl that he meets on a bus, of all places, not knowing that her family is about to become embroiled in a very public scandal. And it's how all of these things converge at one place at one time. It's very, very interesting. It's sort of like a Venn diagram in a lot of ways, but there's some very terrific performances in it, some very moving things about these young people as they strive to move into adulthood. And the performance of Carrie Fox as this drama school head, I mean, she's just amazing. She just bites the screen.
Is there any... do you find any similarity between the rehearsal and Boys in the Trees, or are they vastly different in tone and in look?
Oh, that's a really interesting question. I think they are vastly different. Boys in the Trees is they walk around and they meander and things happen over the course of the night in Halloween. The rehearsal is more compelling and happens over a much broader space of time. It happens over the course of a year. And Boys in the Trees really focuses on the two main characters. Rehearsal is much more sprawling, if you will. What they do have in common is emotional insight.
Okay.
And what's interesting about that is that Alison McLean, who made the rehearsal, who's actually born in Canada and works between Canada and New Zealand, she's a very experienced filmmaker. Nicholas Verso, who made Boys in the Trees, this is his first film.
Yeah, he's part of the Discovery.
So somehow the two, and yet the both of them really know how to dig down, get great performances from people, and performances that allow you to feel the emotional truth of the story.
Now, before we wrap, Jane, I want to go to a different part of the world altogether, and that is with the film "The Women's Balcony," Emile Ben-Shimon.
Yes, this is a really interesting film. It takes place in a modern Orthodox community. And by that, I mean, the women don't always cover their heads and all of those things. But it's a very universal story. And I would hate for people to think that it's really only for people who are interested in those communities. It's a wonderful script by a first-time female screenwriter. And it's the story of a really lovely, small synagogue community in Jerusalem. But one day, the women's balcony caves in and falls down. And their normal rabbi is injured during this accident. And so another younger, quite charismatic leader, almost cultish rabbi comes in and to take over their synagogue. And he has very different feelings about women's place within the community than the women in the community feel. So it's a relatively simple story, but it has a lot to do with speaking truth to power and the value of faith and community. And it's really, really rich and textured. The photography is beautiful. And while it's quite a serious story, it's infused with all kinds of lovely, gentle humor. And I don't know, it's a very rich experience with a lot of universal truths, and I would highly recommend it to people. The director's also coming too, and it's his first film. Even though he's in his 40s, he's been working a lot in long-form television, and I'm really looking forward for us to be able to give him his first film festival experience.
Well, Jane, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been a pleasure speaking to you and looking forward to seeing some of these films. Hopefully I can fit some of them in the press and industry schedule.
I hope so, okay. Yes.
And I hope
Thanks
the public...
so much for the time.
Oh, you're welcome. And I hope the public goes out on September 4th and remembers these titles when they're buying their single tickets.
Check Twitter.
Yes, oh, definitely. Okay, Jane, thank you so much for joining me, and have a great afternoon.
Thank you.
And that was Jane Schoettle. She's an international programmer at the Toronto International Film Festival, which runs from September the 8th to the 18th. Hope some of those titles intrigued you as much as they did me. And for more information, you can go to www.tiff.net, www.tiff.net. But we're not finished yet. Joining me shortly will be Jason Anderson. I've been trying so hard not to say Jason Alexander. Jason Anderson from TIFF will be joining me to talk about the Short Cuts program at TIFF. You're listening to CIUT 89.5 FM. This is Donna G with continued coverage of the Toronto International Film Festival. And joining me by telephone is not Jason Alexander, but Jason Anderson. Yay, did it.
It's happened before many times.
I said, don't say it, and, after my interview with Jane, when I was introducing that you were coming up, I did it, blew it. So
it's one of the two that dogged me because for years, I mean, I would get that name, but also I'd get actual celebrities telling me how much I looked like Nicolas Cage. So those are the two actors who have dogged me my entire life.
But you do look like Nicolas Cage. I wasn't going to mention that either, but you do. So, Jason, I heard that we have a connection. You have a connection to CIUT.
I did. In the early '90s, I came over. I was at another college, a university station in Calgary, and came to Toronto to finish my schooling. And I did a show on very early on Monday mornings at CIUT. I got to play. I think I actually got to play like songs by the Go-Go's, which I felt very victorious about at the time.
Whoa! so groundbreaking.
Yeah, exactly.
That would never go over now.
Oh no, never.
So, moving on from your show called Honey Power.
Yep.
We're moving on to the Short Cuts program at TIFF. And some people might not even know about this section, but it definitely has existed for a while. It used to be Short Cuts Canada. Now it's an international program. And, Jason, there's 11 sections, though. How do people choose?
It's kind of crazy, but we have a lot to get through.
Yeah.
I mean, so essentially what happened was up until, I think, 3 years ago, there was Short Cuts Canada, and that actually was the last Canada-only program in TIFF, because everything else was sort of been integrated. And so 3 years ago, TIFF added international shorts to that. So last year was the first year we had both international and Canadian shorts together in the same program. So that's only our second year of doing so, which is great, because we just have all the best new stuff from Canadian filmmakers and the stuff that sort of stands head and shoulders with anything in the rest of the world. And so we have this amazing selection. And yeah, we ended up with 11 programs of around 90 minutes apiece, and that's culled down from over 4,000 submissions this year. So that was truly daunting.
Yeah. And you know what, Jason, with Worldwide Shorts no longer in operation, this is great for people who love short films to have this international
and that's
section.
The thing. The end of Worldwide Shorts a couple of years ago really did leave that gap, and it's great because there really is an audience for this. I mean, there's definitely some great local series that do shorts regularly, but short film is always a thing that certainly in other places in the world there's much more readily seen. It's tough to get venues for shorts in North America compared to other places, and it's really too bad because this is really where we find the next talent, and it's a big. I mean, not every filmmaker we have is super young, but there is a good proportion of people who are finishing film school, fresh out of film school, starting their careers, and this is really where you discover these amazing new talents from all over the world, and it's really a big part of our mandate to sort of bring them into the TIFF family and usher them into the big festival world that's out there.
Well, I've kind of flipped through, and I've got a few titles actually that I want to talk to you about, and maybe in talking about one, you'll tell me about the section. The film called New Tag or Homeland caught my attention because that's a story I'm familiar with. But tell our listeners about Homeland.
New Tag Homeland.
In Program 1.
In Program 1, and that's by Alicia Telengut. Who's one of 6 Indigenous filmmakers from Canada who are in the program, and we're very excited to be presenting all this amazing work. And it's a big priority for us is representing Indigenous work in the program, and it's a gorgeous animation too. Like it really is something that it's a very kind of hand drawn, painterly style, and a really compelling story about this. Basically what happened to this people who were in the former Soviet Union who were forced relocation to Siberia and much of them sort of wiped out in the process. So it's this gorgeous thing, and we really are, so excited to have this kind of forum for this kind of work, and it's always this is really a great place to find great Canadian animation, because obviously these not often all these sort of great NFB things you think about are from different places. Obviously it's hard to see the films sometimes in other venues. So we're always really proud to have a venue for this sort of work.
You have another sort of First Nations film in Schoettle in that same program. Am I pronouncing it right?
Manet is, yeah.
How do you pronounce it?
Geez. My my colleague Dennis Goulet made sure that she knew how to pronounce it properly when we were at an event last week, but I did not listen carefully enough to remember.
So we'll go with Schoettle, Tshiuetin.
And however you pronounce it, it is a great film. It's Kelly Monet is this amazing filmmaker. We've had her shorts in before, and this is about a 10-minute long documentary about the first First Nations or Indigenous-owned railway in Canada. And it's just this beautiful sort of journey that's just this kind of combination of what you see out the windows and the people on the train, and just this, and what it means both as a kind of like, as a real journey and this sort of metaphorical one in Canada, about sort of drive towards autonomy for many peoples in Canada.
And another one from Program 1, Samedi Cinema.
Oh yeah, and that's so cool. That's a nice. Because that's our very first film for our very first program. I think that was a very conscious choice, because it's basically the story of these two boys in Senegal who are just movie obsessed. The whole thing is really about them trying to kind of get to see this movie that they're desperate to see, and they have a very kind of cunning scheme to kind of help them realize this dream. And that's a great example. I mean, this is by a filmmaker who's Senegalese, but he's been going to school in New York at the TIFF School of the Arts. And we see that kind of thing a lot from filmmakers from all over the world who, often, come to school in the States or Canada, or and then able to sort of go home and do these incredible sort of often graduation projects. And, last year we had places film, one of the first shorts we'd have from Cyprus was one of these films by another one of their classmates. And now we've got this and films like, I think there's a classmate from Venezuela was a film in the festival as well. So we're always excited to have these kinds of really emergent voices from all over who are just expressing and bringing these sort of perspectives and takes from, kind of, being very aware of what they're learning in maybe at New York at fancy film schools, but doing stuff that's really, really rooted in their own cultures and experience.
And moving on to Program 2, the image that caught my eye, and because it's in 3D, is Blind Vasha?
Blind Vasha, yeah.
Blind Vasha.
This is really one of the sort of most acclaimed animators in Canada these days, Theodore Yushev. He did a film called The Lipset Diaries that won a ton of awards, and he had one with us last year called Funambulo. And he is again he's just one of these animators who kind of knocks it out of the park every time he does a film. It just is again like a very different style. And this one's kind of this really eerie kind of version of a sort of old Jewish folktale about a girl who has eyes, one that sees the future and one that sees the past. And to see this realized in sort of 3 dimensions makes you realize, like, oh yeah, this is the sort of technology that tends to be sort of too often squandered with superhero movies. You can really get a lot out of that stuff that isn't just the sort of usual kind of Hollywood, spectacular stuff.
Mm-hmm. In that same program is Cul-de-sac.
Yeah, I love Cul-de-sac. It's funny because thinking about these films, because some of them really are ones that I have to watch a lot of things on screeners at home, and I'm deep. You just, some things just really grab you, and you've just been watching for hours and hours, and then you chance upon this one, and you're like, wow, that's so cool. And so this is one. This is an American one by a team that has already won an Oscar for best short or best live action short film a couple of years ago with a film called Curfew. And this thing is, this I think is a really, like, if you're interested in short film and don't necessarily know if you like it or not, or you're just kind of, this is one where you really watch and you go, wow, this is like not a second wasted. This is like a whole, movie thriller packed into 15 minutes, and it just just grabs you from the get-go. And essentially what it kind of starts from is this very ordinary seeming sort of suburban family, and the guy's, I think he's even on the phone with the phone company. Basically he has a toddler, and he finds some sort of surveillance device hidden inside his toddler's teddy bear, and it just goes from there, and it just is just so wild and so surprising, and really, it's a whole kind of, hour and a half worth of thrills, and in a very, very short running time.
Yeah, it's amazing with short film how much you can pack into the limited time that they have, and the good ones really know how to focus your attention and grab you, as you say.
It's amazing. Sorry. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, I just, that's what I love about a good short film because I've seen some short films. I won't say where, but but even that 5 minutes, you're going, oh my goodness, this is so long. So I definitely know when there's a good 5 minute film, when there's a good 20-minute short. So some people definitely have it in terms of how to make films in that short length of time.
And I was just going to say it's amazing because it's never like, cause, people inevitably ask me, as somebody programs this film, what makes for a good short film, and it really is. I mean, there's all kinds of different approaches that work, but really it's so much and there's plenty of movies that do take a little while to develop, and we've got sort of more, they're not all super intense, frenetic kinds of things. Some of them are quite sort of slow and meditative, but it really is kind of like this sense that you have this. You get a sense very quickly with these films and these filmmakers that they know what they're doing, and then every moment has a purpose, right? And it's not like you're kind of just building up for the first 3 minutes where you're just trying to build some atmosphere. It's like you don't have time.
Mm-hmm.
You have to do a lot. You have to make every moment count, and that's really what we see, and that's really what draws us to the films we pick for the program.
In program 3, there's a film called Drame de fin de soirée.
Oh,
late night drama?
Yes. That's the Drame de fin de soirée. Of course, one of those things, being an Anglo. Oh yeah, late night drama.
Late night.
And that's actually that's an interesting one too, because that's well, first of all, it's a second film we've had by a young Quebecois filmmaker, Patrice La Liberté, who actually won last year for our best Canadian short film prize. Which he did an amazing film called Viaduct that had a lot of success afterwards as well. But this one is one of a couple. I think we have two, and this is definitely a trend you see in short film as you do with feature film, where it's like it's all one shot. I think it all, at least all seems like one shot, and it's this brilliantly sort of choreographed thing set out with this sort of guy who sort of shows up late one night outside a club in winter somewhere in Quebec and has this sort of things are going on. So like this, it's a very kind of intense, and again, you have that kind of virtuosic quality when you get these sort of films that are just all like, how can you kind of just do it all in one shot? There's another one we have called Bargain from South Korea, which is just like so wild.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah, well, since you mentioned Bargain, that's part of program 6. So tell us about Bargain.
Bargain, I had the great, and this, I was a critic for, still am a critic, and I've written for different Toronto papers like iWeekly and The Grid, and so I've done some traveling. But I'm now on the other side, and I get to do some traveling for TIFF. And I went to a festival in Busan in South Korea, like a short film festival, and this was a film I saw there, and was just so wowed by it. And this is like a kind of fresh out of film school or just finishing film school, young director, and I think this film even got him a production deal with one of the big Korean directors, Park Chan-wook. And it's just again like the
Park
audacity
Chan-wook.
and
wow,
smart. Yeah, and Park Chan-wook is at the festival too with another
Yeah.
big film, I think, The Handmaiden. So yeah, this is like, I mean, it's so exciting when you kind of encounter these to see talent like this and be able to kind of go, wow, this is this is a filmmaker who's got some, who's going places.
Mm-hmm.
And you really want to just show the world and just go, hey, pay attention to these people. They're just amazing.
Yeah. Well, we're speeding through here. Program 4, there's this film called Import. And I just love the still of these women they look like they're in scrubs, and they just have their arms crossed. And it's from the Netherlands in program 4. Really interesting look at that short, Import.
Oh yeah, and that's a really fun one, because I think it's basically a sort of very autobiographical piece by a young woman filmmaker who's in the Netherlands, but whose family was from Bosnia, and that's something you really get. Obviously, I mean, the experience of refugees is a huge topic everywhere in culture, and that's something that's definitely a big theme amongst the films we have. And this one's kind of maybe amongst the more melancholy / comic / absurd kind of visions of or takes on the theme, where you have this, very sort of, this families that freshly arrived from Bosnia in the early 90s, in the Netherlands and being very, very confused about the life they experienced there.
In Program 5, there's a film called Red Apples. Armenian, Georgian, American, there's a mix there.
And that's I'm really excited to show that film too, because that's something that's a very, I mean, and then another thing we really get the opportunity to show is a lot of different sort of takes on women's experience all over the world, and this is one where you really have a kind of, I mean, this very traditional kind of circumstance for a new bride in a family in Armenia, and kind of what happens with I can't explain the title. I don't really want to give much away, but certainly there's sort of societal expectations that are placed on people that are, it affects people every day, and it's amazing because you really do get this chance when you're showing 6, 7, 8 films in a program. You get to sort of bring all kinds of things to people and to make them help you that they consider them and consider these different experiences, and also not in a way that's necessarily like, super heavy. You're not asking people to watch like a 2.5 hour thing, You just kind of, you give them this, like a film like this, which is like 15 really tight minutes that really gives you this, and it has a great punch and kind of, and really kind of puts you in other people's skin for, a short time, but a very, very important time.
Another sort of woman-focused film is Blackhead Cow, also in Program 5, the Tanzanian film.
Oh, yeah, and that's a Tanzanian film, and that's by an American woman filmmaker, but she made it in tandem with very, very close collaboration with a bunch of students she's teaching at a school in Tanzania, and they all worked on the film, and like they act in the film, and they co-wrote the film, and they did sound and all this other stuff. There really is this kind of collaborative effort by this community, and it's basically again a story about this sort of young girl in a community who is put in a position where the sort of societal expectation placed on her is really really too much to bear, and really kind of it's a great example of sort of kind of a community film that doesn't. And it plays out in a way that doesn't feel like, because you describe it, it may sound kind of really earnest and not very, not very dramatically compelling necessarily, but it's just so gorgeous and has such impact. Really is amazing work.
Since we're speaking women, the film Anna in Program 7 seems very interesting. That's a woman looking for a man.
Yeah, and that's a great one. I just, I'm full of compliments for my films, as you might expect.
Of course,
it's great going through because there's like dozens of these films in the program, and it's like there's always these. We have, amongst the programming team, it's myself and Dana Schoettle and Kathleen McInnes. I mean, there's just so much. We're just so passionate about these films and really happy to be able to present them. And here's another one from like a really. Like we always have these great films from Israel. Certainly, they have a really, really strong set of kind of film schools and a lot of talent coming out. And this is another one by, a young woman filmmaker about a woman who's sort of kind of midlife or older, this character, and kind of, but really kind of a film about her kind of expressing herself sexually in a way that's very surprising and very emboldening. And something you don't really know. I mean, it's always amazing when you have young filmmakers actually make really mature films about people like who are characters like way older than themselves. You always want to, always impressed by that kind of precocious wisdom.
And then you have Fluffy in Program 8.
And that is another. I think we have 2 or 3 films from filmmakers who were in Serbia. And this is by a Serbian Canadian young woman director, and this is like I think this is. For me, maybe the sweetest one, or close to the sweetest ones we have. Just this. I mean, how could it not be? Because it basically is this, kind of family story that hinges on, the question of whether or not this family is going to move to Canada with this enormous stuffed doll that the daughter in the family has just won from some contest. I mean, it's just this, and it's large. Like it's not like kind of like it's like the size of like a
I can see the picture. It's covering the roof and then some of the car.
Yeah, it's a formidable stuffed animal to move around, especially between countries. But
and in our last couple of minutes, Pariah, South African French co-pro. It's about a woman in Durban.
And that's and again really cool. I mean, another young woman filmmaker. I think she's actually of Indian heritage, but she's in South Africa, and that's sort of a cultural milieu, and that's something we certainly diversity is certainly something that we can emphasize in our selections, but to really kind of find these sort of cultural experiences that don't get very much exposure at all. And certainly this is kind of you see with the characters in this film, which is basically about this young mother who seems to be looking for the guy in her life and sort of traveling across town, and again just this this really compelling character and this incredible kind of sense of environment. I mean, it's kind of a nice bit of sort of opportunity to travel. People talk about that when you go to movies. You're like, but we really give you a lot of mileage, air mile mileage for the fest. If you want to get to many places, I think that without ever leaving a theater, it's hard to go wrong with one of our programs.
And Program 10, you can travel to Chile with a short film with one of the longest titles, And the Whole Sky Fit in the Dead Cow's Eye.
It is, and that's it's such a. I love that title too.
I know.
I wish I could say it properly in Spanish.
Y todo el cielo cupo en el ojo de la vaca muerta.
That sounds amazing.
That's as best as I can do in Spanish.
And this is like this again. It's kind of a story of sort of an older woman's experiences, and an older woman who's concerned about her son and has various sort of premonitions about bad things about to happen. And that's when it's really got this beautiful kind of Gabriel Garcia Marquez quality to it, this sort of magic realism that's very much sort of rooted in this place, and just very, very vivid, and I think one of our standouts for sure.
And Program 11, last but not least, A Brief History of Princess X.
I love this filmmaker. I mean, he's sort of we've got a couple of filmmakers certainly who have been at TIFF, many times before, and this guy, Gabriel Abrantes, is a young Portuguese filmmaker. He's kind of an art star because he does a lot of sort of really wild experimental films, and he's played TIFF with different shorts before. And this one was part of a British company did a bunch of commissions for kind of films about art. And this is basically just this kind of incredible story of this sort of footnote in the career of Brancusi, the sculptor, and how it just gets it's just one of these sort of things you wish like all kind of educational films were like this. Kind of fast and kind of dirty and weird, but still very informative.
Well, Jason, we did it. 11 sections in not very much time. Jason, thank you so much for joining me, and I look forward to seeing some of these films at TIFF. Have a great afternoon, Jason.
Thanks so much.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
And thanks to my guests, Jane Schoettle and Jason Anderson, for joining me to talk about the Toronto International Film Festival, which runs again from September 8th to the 18th. Single ticket date is September 4th, so mark your calendars, and www.tiff.net, www.tiff.net to check out all the films, get ready for September 4th, and buying your tickets. And phone number for TIFF is 416-599-8433 or 416-599-TIFF. Go to the website, plan your festival, and enjoy. This is Donna G signing off. Thank you to Eric for providing me with great technical support today. Bye-bye.